Welcome to Evangelical-ish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American evangelical church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Join us for these episodes live on our Evangelical-ish YouTube page on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 o'clock Pacific. Let's journey together.
Welcome into the Evangelical-ish podcast. It is good to see everyone this evening. I'm Jeremy.
I'm April.
I'm Paul.
And we are glad that you are joining us here tonight.
Welcome back, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.
We missed you last week, but enjoyed you in the comments.
I got the chance to hop in for just a second and hang out toward the end of the show. And then, of course, I'm subscribed on Apple Podcasts, as you should be if you get your podcast from Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. Shameless plug. And then also, if you could like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube, that's super helpful as well. And follow us on the other platforms. A lot of folks don't know we're actually on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, of course. And so all of those are just at evangelical-ish, evangelical with the ISH at the end. So definitely give us a follow on all of those different platforms. We'd love to connect with you there.
Can I say something totally off topic real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I love daylight savings time. It is like bright sunny day right now for me out here in California.
So there is a bill that got unanimously passed through the Senate.
Unanimously passed.
Yes, that we are. Yeah. Of all the division that we have in our country, we can all agree, stop changing the dadgum clock.
So which one's the real time?
So they're talking about leaving daylight savings in place, so we would not fall back in the fall.
Oh, the fall back's the good one, though.
It's only the good one because you have to spring forward.
I know.
If you didn't ever have to do it, it would never be a thing.
Are we in the real time right now before we decided daylight
we're
saving?
in daylight savings
We're
time.
In daylight savings time, but they're talking about making daylight savings time permanent.
So in daylight savings, the sun is at night rather than in the morning. And that's some of the hang up is like, if you stay daylight savings year round, a lot of kids go to school in the pitch dark. You know, that's the one kind of drawback of daylight savings. But I love the sunlight in the evening.
Yeah, I think most people agree, and it seems like 100 senators did as well. So that is, while shocking that we have
agree on
unanimous, there is common ground, friends. So hoping that stays in place. Actually, my wife likes spring forward better because if you work on that Saturday night as a night shift nurse, you only end up working 11 hours because you spring forward in the middle of the night. She hates fall back because you work 13 hours on a 12-hour shift.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those of us who just wake up to a new time, and like, oh man, that felt like longer sleeper, not enough sleeper, whatever. There's actually people who, those graveyard shift warriors that experience the real like struggles of the time change. They live in.
Also shout out to all the pastors out there whose pews are not as full when you spring forward because people sleep in.
Yeah, that's
I remember
true.
that
By the
being
way,
a problem.
when I was a little kid, we went 2 years on just standard time. Like they stopped because of the energy crisis. We were having an oil energy crisis. And so they kept us, Richard Nixon kept us on daylight savings for 2 years, but then they switched it back again.
So daylight savings is the extra thing. Like technically the fallback would be the like OG time.
Yeah, that would be the OG time. And then the daylight savings is the weird one where we decided.
So we're going to stay on the weird one.
We just decided to man-made mess with the clock or whatever.
Does anyone else in the world do daylight savings?
I don't think so. And there's actually, do they?
I think they do. I have some friends that live in Italy and they say their clock changes in like 3 weeks or something like that. So I think they do. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
but like Arizona,
it's the weirdest thing when you're going through daylight savings, but you're also on a road trip going through different time zones. That happened to us last year. We were driving from Texas to Tennessee, and so you obviously go from Central to Eastern, but we were also springing forward my brain about just stopped working.
Did you
trying to
just
figure
like
out
it?
what time we were going to get there?
At one point, did you just like 2 hours of your life just evaporated into space?
Yeah, it
Because
was
you
pretty
were
awful, actually.
moving up an hour and springing forward, so you just like lost 2
Just
hours like in
lost
one
my life.
swoop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We so like Arizona and Hawaii do not change already. They're two states that don't change. But when in
Yeah.
high school, I lived in western Nebraska, and it was an hour drive to Lake Ogallala, which was and you would cross the time zone as you were going to lake. So it took 0 time to get to the lake and 2 hours to get home. So if you left at 1, you would get to the lake at 1. And then if you left the lake at 6, you would get home at 8. So it was just, crazy.
Yeah,
So odd.
it is. It's really, really weird. Yeah.
Random trail you
Sorry,
took us on
I took
there,
us way
Paul.
off track there. Sorry
No,
about that.
I can appreciate that. I am enjoying the sunshine as well. It's been a little bit colder in Oklahoma than I would like this past week, but hey, it's going to be warming up. All right, let's dive off into tonight's first topic. And by the way, I think I saw somewhere in the comments, just to kind of finish this conversation, that the bill proposed would take effect in 2023. So we would go through one more set of time changes, like we would do the fall and the spring, and next spring it would be permanent. So it seems like we may be a year out from just being forever done with that.
And it has to pass the House too, right?
Yeah, but golly, I mean, if it was unanimous in the Senate, surely the House can get it right. But anyway, I don't know. We'll see. Exciting things ahead. All right. Now to more divided topics that are floating around. Over the past several weeks, we have seen a lot of organizations, a lot of churches, especially evangelical churches and other nonprofits and things like that, raising money and resources to send to Ukraine, which I think is absolutely fantastic. However, I've had a question that has kind of just not gone away as I've thought about that process. And so, Paul, I think you pulled a video that I had posted the other day to kind of intro the topic, and we'll get into that. I'm that pastor from Oklahoma. Today I saw that there were several churches collecting resources for folks in Ukraine. Money, food, water, clothes. While, don't get me wrong, I think that is absolutely incredible. Here's my question. Where was this energy when the Taliban was taking over Afghanistan? The quiet part that they don't want to say out loud is that it's easier when the people in need look like you. And I'm sure the rampant Islamophobia inside the American church also played a part. See, when Jesus said, love your neighbor, there was no fine print. There's no disclaimers for race, religion, social status, economic status, sexual orientation. Your neighbor is everyone. Period.
Boom.
And so,
period.
And so I've been thinking a lot about that, and I realized that there has been this rallying cry for the folks in Ukraine to raise, again, money, resources, everything like that. And again, I have no problem with that. I think we should be as supportive as possible in this situation. But I am, absolutely remiss in situations like Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, all of the genocidal attacks happening in African countries that just go neglected. And it is absolutely been brutal to think about that it could be. I don't want to boil it down so simply, but it seems like if it is a country of predominantly white folks, it's just easier for our country to get involved. And it has been sad to watch and to think about that. But I don't know. I want to pose that question to y'all. Have you noticed the same thing? And kind of what are some of your thoughts? As I kind of obviously summed up my stuff in a 60-second video.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously a huge double standard. And I think I've seen a lot of people talking about this, especially a lot of people of color bringing it to our attention. I saw a reporter, and it wasn't Fox News. It was, I don't remember which, like Fox News would make sense, but it was another one of the main ones. I can't remember which one it was, but basically insinuating like, well, these refugees are different, and and I think ended up saying like, these are civilized, and like just told on himself, like, because they're white, like the other people are the same. But also even within Ukraine, there was a report, I know I saw it in the New York Times, that a lot of Africans living in Ukraine were being held at the border and not allowed to flee as refugees by the Ukrainians too. So there's like even racism within the Ukrainian refugees that are trying to flee.
Wow. I think even back to, you talk about a sovereign state that is even, under the United States' protection in Puerto Rico. When they were hit with a hurricane, President Trump standing up in front of Puerto Ricans and launching toilet paper at people, and how just dismissive, how dismissive that was. And
at first he didn't realize they were American citizens, by the way. He
they're
unaware.
American citizens. And can we just pause real quick and say, it is high past time for Puerto Rico to gain statehood.
Oh, like, yeah.
They have a representative in the House of Representatives who is a non-voting person, and they pay taxes. Does taxation without representation sound familiar to anyone? History, anyone? Because I remember something like that. And so we dumped a bunch of tea in the harbor because of it. Anyway, sorry.
Although I did have somebody on TikTok the other day telling me Puerto Ricans don't want to be a state, and they don't necessarily want to continue to be, I can't remember what their exact status is called, but to be a non-state state either. They just to be on their own.
So I think that I think that there is division even inside of Puerto Rico itself between would they want statehood with the United States or would they want entire independence?
Right.
I mean, it's like when I was touring one of the castles in Hawaii, and they were teaching us the history of Hawaii, and I'm like, and that's when they agreed to become a state. And the guy looked at me and said, "Oh, Hawaii never agreed to become a state. We had zero desire to become a state. We became a state at gunpoint."
Wow.
So, I didn't even realize that.
Well, because it's such a, because here's the thing. The reason that the United States wanted Hawaii was because of the strategic military placement of the islands.
Yeah.
It was all about what you can do for me. And the United States looks at Puerto Rico and they go, I'd like to keep y'all around to pay taxes, but we don't really want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah,
on the thing of Ukraine, and I thought your video was really brilliant, Jeremy, how you voiced that. And I guess you could make the argument that it's so close to Europe and NATO that people are feeling like, well, we have to defend this before it gets into Germany, and then becomes a world war. So there is that argument out there. But for me, when I started hearing that people say, oh yeah, we care about white countries getting invaded, but we don't care about Islamic countries or African countries, it hit me again like, man, I just keep learning the depth of sort of the whiteness in me. And none of that stuff even occurred to me until a person of color, and I think it was an MSNBC host I saw the clip of, was bringing that up. And I was like, oh man, there I go again. I didn't even think of this, but yes, we care a lot more about white countries getting invaded than genocide happening in African countries. And I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah.
There is zero debate about whether or not we pay closer attention to that. And it really, this is on the world stage, the same thing that we saw. I was really challenged by some mutual creator friends on TikTok, especially like around the Gabby Petito circumstances, right?
Mm-hmm.
Several really great indigenous creators started bringing up the fact that, like in Montana and Wyoming, how many indigenous young girls go missing every single year. Where's all the national media coverage for that?
Right.
And I think one of them at some point said, it's the you know, it's the story of the, you know, the pretty white girl, like you know, and they know that
100%. 100%.
they get the clicks and the views and the whatever. So this thing becomes national media coverage when there are, you know, I forget what the number was. I mean, I think it was well in the hundreds of Indigenous women that had gone missing in the last 10 years that you hadn't even heard their names, you know, and so I think it just stems back down to the white nationalism that still exists so heavily inside of the United States. You know, and it probably also didn't hurt that this was an opportunity to kind of, you know, stick it to Russia, because I think there's still a lot of Americans, even though we've seen some insanity from the far right, but I think there's still a lot of Americans who just really despise Russia because they have Cold War mindsets. And so I don't think that hurt either. But, you know, it's like
that's the weird thing, because they do still have Cold War mindsets, but I've seen so many white American evangelical Christians borderline being pro Russia in all of this and pro Putin. Like it almost feels like we're in some kind of twilight zone, because it does not make any sense.
Don't forget Franklin Graham praising Putin around the Sochi Olympics for being homophobic and passing anti-gay laws. And I do think there is a stream of Christendom that is like, boy, I wish we had an autonomous president that could just pass anti-gay laws and make us a Christian country.
They want Christian white supremacy in this country. Like they want, like, just even with the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida and the anti-trans bill in Texas, which they're trying to do a bill here in Tennessee along the same Don't Say Gay bill line. Like, it is so ridiculous. I saw which this is not the topic, so we could talk about this another time, but I saw a post it was like a queer theology Instagram page. I can't remember who it was, but they just said, like, we, as in like queer people, we are not trying to turn your straight kids gay. We're trying to keep your gay kids alive.
Yeah. Good. Boom.
Yeah.
Like, by the way, here's it. Oh, go ahead, April. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, just like avoiding the topic, it's just the ignorance of it all. It's like they want to dig their head in the sand on things that they don't agree with, that they don't understand, refuse to have conversations and actually hear people's stories, and just demonize the crap out of people.
I had a pastor friend here in Oklahoma. This is to me the like, this just sums it up. I had I wouldn't even say friend, a pastor that I am familiar with here in Oklahoma. His church was doing a fundraiser for Ukraine, and he gets up on Sunday morning and gives this whole, you know, I stand with Ukraine speech, right? And then Monday morning starts posting about how illegal immigration at the border is such a problem and we need to build the wall. So let me get this straight. On Sunday, you say, I stand with Ukraine and its refugees, and our church is willing to take those refugees. And on Monday, you say, build the wall. You are in direct competition with yourself. You are a double-minded person. And Jesus had some very serious words for the double-minded. And so, you know, I can't take you serious when you're in conflict with yourself that way.
And I've heard this one from Christian friends before too. Why don't we just take over Mexico? They've got a lot of resources down there.
We're so awful. Like, as a cult, like, we're not even a culture, like white America. Like, what even are we? We're just colonizers, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is our culture.
Right. We just take things.
Yeah.
And then, like, gaslight people into saying, like, oh no, this was for your benefit. Like, no, it wasn't. It was for
Yeah.
And we give a lot of money every year to help Israel subjugate Palestinian people as well, behind walls in really horrific living conditions. And again, not our people, so we don't care.
Ugh, it's so maddening. Do you guys just find yourself like just not even knowing what to say sometimes? Because I feel like I used to be in these circles, and it used to make so much sense to me, and the more time that passes that I'm away, I don't understand, 1, how I used to think that way,
Well,
but then 2, like, I don't know how to get through to these people. A lot of these people are, like, family members and like, friends that I used to have, that I used to know, and I just there's just so much hate that they can't see, or at least they're lying to themselves that it's hate because they wrap it up in a Bible verse and call it love. But I'm just sometimes I'm just dumbfounded at how to move forward.
I want to ask you both this question. I want you to weigh in on this because we all come from a very similar background in this sense of being people who were active conservatives, active in evangelical churches, leading in those churches, on staff at those places, Republicans. Like we have all talked about that past. There's no secret in that. Sometimes I look at it and I think, yes, I believed a lot of really troublesome things. I mean, like I'm not trying to downplay any of it. Like my internalized homophobia and misogyny was really gross. Like I really needed to answer for some of those things. No doubt. However, I just have to ask, was it that crazy when we were mixed in it?
I mean, if
Or
you
do
read
you think that the right has just gone running so hard in this extreme, insane direction that it has left any semblance of the Republican Party that we were even a part of? Which I'm not saying there were, like, again, there were still things that we definitely had to, or I should speak for myself. There were definitely things I still had to reconcile. There were things that I had to work through. There were things that were bigoted and homophobic and transphobic and misogynistic about my belief system. And I had to reconcile that. I've had to apologize to those communities and my friends in those communities. But I don't know if it was this insane. It just feels like it has taken its own sprint off into nutso land.
I think it's a combination of both. I think it was still bad when we were in it. We were indoctrinated and beliefs. I mean, if you read Jesus and John Wayne, this has been going on for a long time. I think it was more subtle when we were in it. And,
Right.
and maybe that's like, I don't know, a cop out for me to say like, oh, I just didn't see it because it wasn't so obvious. Like, I think if my eyes were open now, it would be obvious even back then. But like, I do think Trump enabled a lot of the overt racism, homophobia. Like, they're saying the quiet part out loud. And so I think it was easier as a Christian, even like as an evangelical back then, to be able to defend my faith because it wasn't so obvious. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. We're like, now I don't see any defense for supporting Donald Trump.
Maybe I was just kind of blissfully unaware of maybe some of the extremism inside of the right. You know what I mean? Like I still wanted to believe that you could be a conservative and love all, and I don't want to make this extremely political, but I just, so Lori's saying, yes, it's always been this bad. As I learned more about actual history, I bought into the dog whistle and defend base.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, like you have slavery, Jim Crow, just the civil rights movement in the 60s, all of that was before today, and it was very overt back then. Maybe we were in like the sweet spot where we pretended we weren't racist, even though we were.
I think maybe that's what it is. I think it was this. It was this blissful, unaware indoctrination of like, well, I don't really hate, those people or whatever, but you had, because that is some of the biggest things that I've had to deconstruct is my mentality about, just those internalized things that were like part of the cogs, and I think that's why it's so hard to explain like systemic racism to somebody who refuses to see it. It's because I'm not saying, because their pushback is always this, right? Well, show me the laws. What laws are racist? Show me the literal laws. And it's like, you have to understand the entire system was built on an ideal of, white supremacy. And that's harder to explain in that sense. Even though I think that there are some very specific areas.
Beecher brings
I
up a
think
good.
when you look back and see, sorry, April,
No, you're
when
fine.
you see the threat of it, like I think it was more subtle, and I see a lot of people saying social media has amplified this, and I think that's true. But I think Trump is not the cause of this. Trump is the manifestation of this, and it very much started in the Nixon administration when Nixon started talking silent majority, and we're not those long-haired hippie creeps. And if you go back now and look at things Reagan said, Reagan refused to say the word AIDS. The first George Bush had a campaign commercial about Willie Horton, the black prisoner that raped a white woman under Michael Dukakis.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that
governorship. I mean, so that, and then even the second George Bush, spreading the rumor that John McCain had an illegitimate black child in the primary. So it's always been there. But I think it just has continued to build upon itself. And I think they thought, like, we can just have a leash on this dog. We'll do dog whistles. We'll get the Southern whites this way. And now the dog is off the leash and out of control.
And I think Beecher has a good point in the comments that said back then, we, like evangelicals, when I was growing up, were winning the culture war of like racism and homophobia quietly. And then that stopped working. So they had to get loud.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is kind of the time period that we grew up in, right? Is like so many of us grew up in when it was that quiet winning, and then it got loud and became, just what it is today. And I have often said that I am grateful to President Trump for at least making it really easy for me to distinguish who the racists are. Right. Yeah. Like they're easy to pick out now. Before it was not as easy. Now it's like, I see your MAGA hat.
I truly think Christians have to look in the mirror on this. Cause I just read an article yesterday of a Republican think tank guy who was saying out loud, if you voted for Joe Biden, you are not a legitimate American. Like, we've got to get rid of those people so we can rebuild legitimate America. And by legitimate America, he meant Trump followers and white voters. And it's, I mean, that is scary, scary stuff. And I just never could have believed that Christians would endorse it, but it's been there under the surface more than we know. They're just now being allowed to say it out loud and to act out loud on it.
Yeah.
And they're scared and manipulated. Their media is telling them every day, those people are coming to get you and take things from you.
Yeah.
And so they're fighting back.
Well, and did you see too, U.S. Senator, Mike Braun said that the Supreme Court made a mistake legalizing interracial marriage.
My God, it's 2022. Mike.
Like how, like they're trying to take us so far back.
What was the hypocrisy there? I mean, I guess we always make jokes about punching people in the face. And my God, if I saw Ted Cruz walking through an airport, I would punch him in the face. I cannot. I have such a passionate hatred for that guy, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't. But what he did in the SCOTUS hearings this week, that guy deserves to be run over by a trolley car. He is really a terrible human being.
People.
Oh, him and Lindsey Graham
and Josh Hawley are the worst human beings on the planet. They're terrible.
Josh Hawley belongs in jail.
Oh gosh, no doubt.
I mean, Ted Cruz is just dumb, and Lindsey Graham is doing what he's told to do. For whatever reason you think he's doing that, Lindsey Graham is just doing what he's told to do.
Well, Lindsey's Josh Hawley, Lindsey is devoid of morals. He has none.
Yeah, no.
But people like Marjorie Taylor Greene have an agenda, and they truly want people of color, people that aren't like her, to not have the same rights and access in the country as she and her kind have. And that's what's so Lindsey's terrible, but he's somewhat just a cartoon because he'll He'll
No,
do whatever he
1,000%.
has
Well, and
to
every
do.
once in a like, there's been times where I've agreed with what Lindsey Graham. It's like every once in a while, a
Yes.
moment of sanity will come out of Lindsey Graham, and I'm like, oh, okay, so he does have a brain. He
That's
just doesn't have
true.
any morals.
That's true. No, that's exactly right. Well, and then when he gets out of line, somebody
Right?
comes
They
to
put
him and
him right back in line.
yeah,
Like,
they
no,
put him back in
Lindsey.
line. They're like,
Yeah.
Lindsey, we'll let everybody know all your secrets. So,
By the way,
there's a lot of speculation.
Ketanji
about
Brown
that.
Jackson is my new superhero. She is awesome.
Oh, she's a
She
beast.
stayed. She was so professional. Like, I don't know. I would have had the hardest time not being like just clapping back.
Well,
they were so annoying. Oh my gosh.
Compare her to Brett Kavanaugh. Compare her and Brett Kavanaugh in
My
the
calendars. Look at my calendars with PJ. Just crying.
I mean, he was a petulant little boy, and she is a professional judge.
Yeah.
She's awesome. She's tearing it
He
up.
felt unstable. Like he felt unstable. And like he couldn't take the heat. And she has just sat there and given it back. And I think the reason the Lindsey Graham exchange stuck out so much is because it was like he was trying to get her to say that, basically that Brett Kavanaugh was treated so poorly and unfairly. And she's like, bro, I'm not Brett Kavanaugh, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, you idiot.
So stupid.
But she handled it like a boss. I mean, she's a beast. So exciting days ahead. So I'm ready for her to be just confirmed, and let's move on.
Yes,
so,
agreed.
All right, y'all want to run to a mid-roll and get to another segment?
Let's do it.
Evangelical-ish. Follow us to catch all the latest content and encouragement. You can check us out on TikTok by following @Evangelical-ish or subscribe on YouTube by searching Evangelical-ish. That's Evangelical with an ISH. And don't forget to catch our live streams each and every single Wednesday night on YouTube at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 Pacific. And now, back to the Evangelical-ish podcast.
So I'm feeling like a horrible person today because there's somebody else that we're going to talk about now that I would like to punch in the face, and that's John MacArthur. I would really like to punch John MacArthur in the face.
We have a hit list going on this show.
We've got to stop trying to punch people. We can win with our words and kill them with kindness.
But where's the fun in that?
You obviously never read Wild at Heart.
Yeah. Well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Maybe y'all still have.
Did you ever read that book, Jeremy?
Yeah. Oh yes, of course. I was in 3 small groups. Count them, 3 small groups that went.
Did y'all ever go to Promise Keepers?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
God, it was
so
awful.
Maybe y'all still have some of that internalized toxic masculinity from that the evangelical church taught you. That's why you just want to punch all these awful people. Oh,
by the way, in case anybody's keeping score at home, there's a church in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Guts Church. They were sued several years ago for having unsanctioned MMA fights at their guys' nights. Yeah, and a guy got paralyzed, and they caught this huge lawsuit for it. Anyway, so they are having Jocko Willachink come and preach.
Who?
I don't know who that is.
He's like the Navy SEAL guy.
Oh,
he has I don't know. They
are late. I mean, I guess it's always been this way, but more so lately, they're getting all these Republican politicians to come speak in churches.
Oh yeah.
As the preacher.
Yeah.
So stupid.
Yeah.
Paul, did you have the
Patriot
video?
Church and Guts Church, and so let me tell you why I have all this pent up energy to punch John MacArthur in the face, and it's because misogyny, thy name is MacArthur and Grace Community Church.
Christian pastors and leadership should be held accountable for this.
This is bringing heaven down. This is what the Lord wants. He wants discipline. One of the forms of discipline that he uses is to be put out of the church, to be publicly shamed, to be put away from the fellowship. In this case, it applies to Eileen Gray. Her husband David and Eileen have been in the church for many years. husband to grant no grace to him at all, to take the children, to go away, to forsake him, not to reconcile, to reject all the instruction and counsel of the elders, all the instruction from the Word of God. Many of our pastors have been involved in this very tragic situation in which she continues to throw accusations against her husband. We've done everything we can to call her to repentance, and now we have to do what the Bible says and put her out and treat her as if she's an unbeliever. For all we know, she may well be. Pray for Eileen Gray that she will repent, and that the joy of her salvation will be restored. Pray for David, for the sympathy, the compassion, and the loving kindness of God be his portion. Well, let's sing Amazing Grace. You know it. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound.
All right. I want to punch somebody in the face.
So, in case people couldn't hear that are listening, that was John MacArthur publicly shaming Eileen Gray, who was a member. And we talked about this briefly last week when we were talking to Matt Pfeiffer about narcissism and cover up for abuse. But so, long story short, if you follow Julie Roys, she is an investigative reporter, and about a week or so ago broke this story that John MacArthur's church, Grace Community Church, which is in Sun Valley, California, that back in, when was it? 2004 or
5, I believe it came. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so basically I'll go through the story briefly and we'll talk about it. So this family, husband and wife, and they had 2 kids, I think. Anyway, they have children.
Yeah.
The husband was abusive to both the wife and the kids. The wife took it to the church leadership and, said, hey, my husband is abusive. I don't know what to do about this. And so they're like, oh, let's do marriage counseling. They do marriage counseling where, I believe even confessed to some of the abuse in this counseling. It was not reported, like even to child abuse. The church encouraged Eileen, the wife, to continue submitting to her husband because that was her godly duty as a wife, even if David wasn't fully living right for God. Even if he was abusive, it was her right to still submit to him. So they do marriage counseling. His behavior did not change. Like, the typical, you would appear repentant to the church staff and then they would believe him, but he continued the behaviors at home. So eventually she takes her kids and separates from him, puts a restraining order against him because he was still being abusive. And the church told her that she was living in sin and living out of God's will by separating, and that it was her godly duty to return to her husband. And she basically said, I'm okay with putting myself in danger and handling the abuse, but I am not okay with subjecting my children to that. And some of the stories, there are details of what he did to her kids that will make you so mad. But anyway, just for you can go read the full. There's a very detailed article online if you go to Julie Roy's website. So anyway,
and I would just say her report was he admitted to one of the things was to kicking the kids and strangling one of them.
Strangling one of them into almost
passing out.
Yes. Yeah. So then during all this
and
time,
he told the church leaders that.
Yes, the church leaders were aware.
That to the church leaders.
Did not report it. Still took his side over the wife and the children because patriarchy and and John MacArthur, if you don't know who he is, he's a huge complementarian, which means he is very big on gender roles, that men are the heads of households and that women basically live to please and support men.
He's the
he told
he's
Beth
the senior
Moore
leader.
to stay home.
Yeah.
He's the one that told Beth Moore to stay home.
He's the senior leader of the Theo Bros, Reformed Theo Bros is basically what he is.
Yes, the worst of them.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, they're all terrible. So,
anyway,
sidebar, the Theo Bros have been awfully silent, either silent on this since this is broken, or they're somehow defending him and just saying that Eileen made it all up. Oh, and just to clarify, the husband, his name's David, is currently serving time in prison for child abuse. And it even came out later that he also sexually assaulted them as well. And so he went to prison, was convicted in a courtroom, sentenced to prison, I think serving like 21 years.
And was just denied parole.
Good.
This was, if this was in 2004, this was what, 17 years ago, whatever. So a lot of people are like, why bring this up now? It was so long ago. Well, so this all happens. John MacArthur twice in a public sermon shamed Eileen, the wife, saying that she was living in sin. And as a result of this, members of the church started harassing her, saying that she needs to get back with her husband. All these things. So even when he was convicted and sentenced to prison, she called the church to inform them, hey, like he was convicted, and left her and asked to speak to John MacArthur, wanting an apology, and was put on hold for like 5 minutes. And the secretary came back and said, I will give him your cell number. He never called. In however many years has passed, the church has never apologized. In fact, they have continued to support him, the husband, while in prison. And people that went to the church basically were told that he was just wrongly convicted.
Stop.
They put a letter on their website for a time that said so, and please pray for him because he's going to jail because of false accusations from his wife.
Well, and she even, when all this, before he was convicted, the church was nonstop harassing her, sending her letters and saying like, you're living out of God's will as your church body. It is our duty to inform you of this. She requested to be removed from the membership of that church, and they denied her request. And they said, no, sorry, you are living in sin, and so we can see things that you can't see, or whatever jargon that they said, but denied her request and continued to harass her and never apologized.
Yeah, that's what I had read. They're funding his prison
ministry. This guy has now started a prison ministry that they support.
Yeah, financially supporting it.
This makes me so mad. And they're like, and you'd think since this is broken that there'd be some kind of apology. No, there's not. I went to John MacArthur's Twitter to see what he's tweeting. There's been nothing on this. He tweeted anti-gay stuff and anti-women stuff because that's
of course.
I on that video on my TikTok, of course, I had a woman come on and say that was 20 years ago, and that reporter has an agenda against Pastor MacArthur and the church. And I'm like, and that makes it okay. I think why this is such an important topic, and while I love to point out what a horrible person John MacArthur is and Reformed churches are, the bigger point of all of this is this isn't a one-off from a bad church and a bad pastor. This is a philosophy that overarches evangelical Christianity as a whole, and particularly the complementarian churches, that the wife is always going to be considered suspect when she brings accusations against her husband, and it has to stop.
Yeah, I think that is the thing, is that it is no longer, for so long, people have tried to, justify it as, well, it's not my church, it's not all churches, it's not, it's not all men, it's not whatever. It is becoming the rule, not the exception. Well, it is the rule, not the exception. Not becoming, it is the rule, not the exception. And we just have to say, when people come to me and they say, well, what about, this church or that church or, this guy, whatever, if they are in line with any of that at all, I'm like, cult leader, period. Like it just, I am no longer harboring, even if you just think that way. Like, I'm sorry, but I like, even if your theology just is that way, like I have no space for you. And I'm never going to point any of my more conservative Christian friends in your direction, because you're a cult leader and you are creating an environment, and you are breeding an environment for abuse to just continue. Like it is just generational abuse of women and children. And
Well, and
yeah.
it's not just like, obviously the argument is not all churches, but where are the churches that are calling this out? Like they've been silent on it. Like they protect their own. And there's this whole the narrative, like, do not touch God's anointed, don't go after God's anointed. Like I remember hearing that growing up, like, oh yeah, well, this pastor did mess up, but we're not going to publicly call him out because that could hurt someone's faith.
If you're raping kids and hitting women, you are not anointed.
No,
and the thing is, I mean, I get that it's not all churches thing, but it is all church. It is an overarching principle that impacts all our churches. And I'm not saying everybody does this to a T, but when we go to that, it's not my church, then we're missing that this is a mindset that impacts all of Christianity. And where Wild at Heart comes into it, and I see somebody asking questions, that teaching that boys, you need to be out there shooting things and killing animals, and girls, that provides the breeding ground for all of this. Then add in a little purity culture, and all of a sudden, women become sexualized beings for the hardy, masculine, go-getter hunter man. And it breeds the situations where even people trying to do their best fall into this. Well, is the man out of line for wanting his wife to have sex when she doesn't want to? These things start to come into play, and all of us have to call it out and say, this has to go. This is not Christ-like in the slightest.
No, there's still posts going around. Like I saw a post on Facebook recently, some Theo bro that shared a meme that says, if you can't lead her, you don't need her. This idea that women need a man because we are not, I guess, capable of leading ourselves. Like the idea of just male headship. There's this really harmful graphic that I've seen shared hundreds of times, and that is not an exaggeration, of this umbrella. It's like the biblical family hierarchy, and it has God or Christ as the top umbrella, then husband, then wife, then children. And they're all, it's in stack. It's a hierarchy where the woman needs to obey their husband in all things. And you even have like that crazy lady, the transformed wife, Lori Anderson or whatever. Like she is straight up toxic. Yes, we don't need it. We remember her.
How could I believe
did she bring Lori? The term anal into the show one day?
To jab Lori.
Yeah. But anyway, she tweets things like she has the most internalized misogyny, because she tweets things like that. She thinks that women should have never been given the right to vote, and that women voting is in charge, is the reason that like millions of babies have been killed in her mind. Like it is so gross, like how demeaning it is as a woman. And there's something that like I still deal with today. And I didn't even grow up in a complementarian church, but it seeps in. It seeps into all evangelical churches. Like that, like even today, I struggle with knowing my own worth, because I feel like I need validation from a man to tell me that I like am worthy, because I was always taught like it's the man that has to like give you the permission. It's the man that can validate you and affirm where you're going. And it's like, it's complete bullcrap. And I've unlearned a lot, and it still comes up every once in a while. And I was not overtly taught that. I was not in a complementarian church. And that is something that I like have to deal with in therapy, just because I have a frickin' vagina.
And right on, April. Love it. Love it. Not that you need my approval to be okay with it. I promise you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying I need it, but it's just, it's the ingrained
No, we
stupidity of it all.
are agreeing as friends and
Yeah,
co-hosts.
yeah,
That was a nice take. That
Yes.
was a
People-
great
Thanks, April, for your contribution. Now be quiet.
For a woman, that was really brilliant, April. Let me tell you.
Why are you always? I missed you taking shots at me. I'm so glad to be back.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
But if you think so, here's Eileen coming forward, having this happen to her. How many other women are going to say it's not worth it? I'll just take the beating. You know, I'm not allowed to. I think there are tons of evangelical women out there taking the beating from their husband, maybe trying to stand between the husband and the kids, but they know I'm not allowed to bring this to the church, and certainly not allowed to go to the cops. So I'll just take the beating. And that's why we have to call this out. And I when I read about Jesus, and Jesus said, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets. Well, not every person in Jerusalem had killed a prophet, but he was saying there's a spirit here that needs to be broken. And I think this is an evangelical reform, whatever you want to call it, spirit that impacts us all in Western Christianity, that we all have to stand up and say, not okay.
Sorry, Paul. I think there's a really interesting narrative that sets itself up even as far back as like the creation narrative, right? Where we see this moment. Also inside the creation narrative is another reason that I tell people that true love is true choice, right? Like why was there a tree in the narrative? Why was there a tree in the middle of the garden that was to choose against God? It's because God knew that real love didn't come without real choice. And I coach couples all the time that, I want to be married to somebody that doesn't need me, but wants to be with me. Right. Mm-hmm. Like my wife is strong, fierce, independent, professional. Like she doesn't need me, but she wants to be with me. We want to be with each other. Right. But I will say this, there's this interesting kind of going back to what we were talking about of, this passive, like it's not our fault. We didn't do it. Like it's not all men. It's not all churches, that kind of thing. We see this thing almost like set up from the very beginning of the text where, lest we forget that Adam inside that narrative is not like gone and missing. He's standing right next to Eve by all accounts as she is being, tempted or having this conversation with the serpent. And she eats of the fruit, she has the whole conversation. And then she turns to him and goes, well, you should take some too. And he just takes it and never says a single word, never shows leadership or anything else that these guys want, men to be all about. And then when they go hide because they discover that they are naked, one of my favorite questions in all of scripture is, God's like, well, why were you hiding? And well, we were naked. Well, who told you were naked? Like you had no idea you were naked, right? But one of the most important things in scripture that I think men have to constantly fight about is this right here, is God says, well, who told you were naked? And, they were like, well, we ate of the fruit. And then Adam goes, well, God, it's this woman that you gave me.
This woman. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This woman that you
blaming
gave
the woman.
Right. And so it's this automatic passive. He blames not only Eve, but also blames God and never takes any responsibility for it. And so my challenge would be is that we need men who are willing to say, yes, I'm part of the problem. Yes, I have issues. Yes, I've got stuff that I'm working through. And I'm going to be accountable and I'm going to hold others accountable as well. You know what? I'm willing to sit here right now and say, yes, it is all men to some extent, right? Like it is all men, whether you like that or not. We have internalized misogyny, things I'm discovering almost daily about myself that I'm like, I have to rework or recalibrate or deconstruct.
And here's the thing. If I am out alone if I have to go get gas at night and I see a man, I know it's not all men, but I'm still going to hold my keys in my hands like a weapon just in case, because I don't know who this person is. Like it is enough men that I can't trust any men when I'm out alone.
Did you guys see that Christianity Today called itself out? Like, I don't know if you saw that article.
Did they really?
Christianity Today published an article in their own publication saying, we have had sexual harassment going on in our offices for
Yeah,
years
I did
and
see
did
that.
nothing about it.
Can
Mark,
we also just
what's
say
the guy's
too?
name?
Yeah,
I was going to say
Mike
Mark.
Cosper.
No,
it
the
was-
guy who
he's
wrote the op-ed about Trump that got such big.
the current president of Christianity Today, right?
No, the
current
one that wrote the article about Trump and then retired. I think he was the editor, and it was Mark something. But he's one like is being accused of putting his hand on the lower back of women all the time. You know, consoling them, doing all of those things. And so I do think, and it is all men. I agree with you, Jeremy. I think we were in many ways taught as boys, this is who you are. You go get your woman, and so it is internalized, and it has been taught in Christianity for years and years.
Well, just the audacity too that these people have. These are the same people that hashtag save our children, that are all in the QAnon of that there's a bunch of sex trafficking going on underneath the White House or whatever the new conspiracy is. But like, save the babies, save the children. They give this appearance that they care for the well-being of children. And yet they are choosing the abuser over those kids.
Yep.
They sent that man home to abuse those kids after knowing he abused those kids. What the crap is wrong with these people? You don't care about the children.
No.
You care about your own power and your own money and your own well-being. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
That's all there is to say. Yeah, and Brian Houston now with Hillsong, the accusations are coming out. It is truly like, Robbie Zacharias, Willow Creek guy. This it seems like it's more often than not. And our friend Promise, who is the Eve Was Framed person on TikTok, which is a very apt name for this topic. She did her thing the other day where somebody said, "Oh, you're just becoming an atheist because you want to sleep around without consequences." And she said, "If I wanted to sleep around without consequences, I would become an evangelical pastor."
That's exactly right.
And
and they have this narrative that LGBTQ people are like the child molesters or like the sexual predators, that they're going to ruin your children for whatever reason.
Democrats.
Or the Democrats. The sexual predators are freaking in the pews.
In the church.
They're on your staff.
I would rather
behind the pulpit.
I would rather my I'm gonna say this. I would rather my daughter go into the restroom with a transgender woman than I would my daughter go into a restroom with a Baptist youth pastor. I'm just saying.
100%.
I mean, like, there is zero doubt in my mind that I would much rather. So,
and was that whole transgender bathroom bullshit, and you don't want a transgender woman going into the women's restroom or a man in a dress. And I'm like, hey, the predators are in the men's restroom. The place you have to look out for your kids is your boy in the men's restroom. That's who the predators are. And so we demonize, but the demons are us. And so I think what I want to encourage people is like, call the staff of your church and say, what is our policy on this? What happens if a woman comes, and can we have some conversation about this so our wives in our church know that they don't have to take abuse? They should never take abuse. It's one slap from a husband should be bring an accusation and say this, and a call to the police. It is illegal. It's immoral. It's horrible. And settling it internally in the church is not okay.
Well,
and people should be warned. If there is a sexual offender or sexual predator in your church and you are aware of it, you need to inform the people that are around this person.
Yes. Yeah. Well, but here's the other side of it too. And we talked about this pre-show today. Paul, you had brought up the law there in California, and it is the same in Oklahoma. That if somebody enters into a counseling session with a pastor or a confessional with a priest, and they mention abuse of any kind, sexual abuse, physical abuse, that they are asking for repentance or prayer because they have fallen into this sin or whatever they want to call it. There is no obligation by the pastor, priest, clergyman to report that to anyone.
Yeah. If they say it's a confession, then it doesn't have to be.
If it's a confession or
doesn't have to be reported.
Or counseling. And to be perfectly frank, that is one thing I've obviously set up very serious boundaries for in my life, but I have also quit using the term counseling in any of the things that I do. Right. I call it coaching just because, there are things that need professionals who went to school and, worked really hard to be those people. And so, I'll coach you, I'll give you advice, I'll give you wise counsel, hopefully. But, we just have to do better. We just have to do better.
And Dennis was asking in the comments if I was saying gays are predators in the restroom. Not at all. What I was saying is most sexual predators on children are men and straight men, cis men.
Yes.
in the male restroom. I was saying the place where the restroom where your child is in most danger is your young boy in a men's restroom with men in there, because most sexual predators of children are straight men, or at least presenting straight
presenting men who are mostly married. I mean, watch this guy that's been getting national media attention. He has a nonprofit in California Ped Patrol. They go online and create accounts and do these, like basically private investigator sting operations. Right. And most of the men that they catch are middle-aged men who are married with kids, but they are preying on little boys on apps like Grindr.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's so.
I think this
awful.
has to be called out. This has to be talked about in churches. Churches need to be saying, women, that man never gets to lay a hand on you. Husbands, if you lay a hand on your wife or kids, we will call the police and you will go to jail. And period. It's not okay. Never, ever, ever.
Well,
and churches have got to quit covering it up.
Well, and not even just in churches, but it's just like defending whoever will give you the power, like the way they defended Donald Trump bragging about sexually assaulting women. They were like, oh no, that's just locker room talk. Like they care until they don't, like,
yeah,
it's stupid. But it's also, and we talked about this earlier too, but I personally have been a part of churches where I know there was a rape cover up. And the guy was still allowed to come to the church, and the girl who accused him left. Like I know of that personally, that happened. Like I know of several instances where there were sexual predators, and it was just covered up. It's just covered up.
This is terrible stuff, and so we call it out. It's got to stop. And women, you are powerful, wonderful. Paul had apostles who were women in his church. Jesus had leaders in his group who were women. The idea that women are somehow, that are somehow a subclass of human beings is a complete lie. It is completely from the pit of hell, and it needs to go back there and not be anything in our thought, speaking, or teaching in any way whatsoever.
And I would just encourage men, own up, stone up.
Yeah.
Talk about the places that you're coming up short and challenge other men to do better. I think we need to stop saying it's not all men and start saying, yeah, it is all men. I may have never physically abused my wife, but I have had times of, and I've shared this on my platform on TikTok. There have been times where I have been, emotionally abusive or, whatever the case is. And, or my misogyny was just so big, and I didn't even, indoctrinated or not, we have to grow out of it and we have to start calling each other out of it. And, so you know what, guys, if that makes you uncomfortable, come join. It sucks, like it does, because you have to answer some really hard questions about yourself, but good. And maybe we can make the world a little bit safer place. You know, I don't know.
That
No.
and listen to women. Like
Yeah.
if a woman is telling you a story about a man or about men that have abused her or whatever, like if your initial gut reaction is like, oh, well, I haven't done that, you know,
No,
or
believe victims.
believe victims, listen to women and like elevate women too, who speak on these issues and their voices. And which is
By the
hard
way,
to do, especially if you grew up in evangelical circles. Elevating female voices is unnatural.
Can we also get rid of spare the rod, spoil the child?
Yeah.
Can we throw that shit out? I'm sorry. I think spanking is abusive. I think laying your and I used to be like, oh, we can think differently on. I'm now convinced it's abusive. There just is no reason to ever create physical harm on a child for a good purpose. You don't need it. It doesn't help. It doesn't work. All indicators, all scientific research shows it does not work. It doesn't make a child feel valued or safe. No parent should lay physical violence on a child for a good end ever. So let's throw that spare the rod, spoil the child bullshit out as well.
So I was raised in a home that, used corporal punishment, with a belt.
Yep.
And I always swore. So, for a long time, I was very conservative in my thoughts and whatever. And so I was like, well, I will spank my kids, but I won't use anything. I'll use my hand, I'll use my hand. And then I remember an instance when my oldest daughter, who's now 7, was 2. And, we would occasionally just give her the diaper spat, or whatever. We were never, which still not okay. But, I remember she had a problem with hitting. She was, she'd no, as toddlers do, they just do. Right. And I remember spatting her diaper and thinking, I am hitting her and telling her not to hit. That made absolutely no sense. And that was the deconstruction of that for me. And so, obviously we have made changes in our parenting, and, it's been kind of a tough parenting week here. We're just having to make more changes, especially with our son who was, diagnosed with ADHD this week. And, it's been challenging for sure, but.
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear that, Jeremy.
Yeah. No, it's all good. Not to sidetrack, but just to say there are ways that you can parent without being physically violent towards your children.
Yeah.
I think it's time. I want to tell parents, I think there is zero value for corporal punishment. It just doesn't work. And it just creates a violent atmosphere and children afraid of violence.
Well, and also just having conversations with your kids about topics instead of just saying, oh, it's because I said so. I don't know if you guys saw that viral post about Turning Red, the new Disney Pixar movie.
Dude, that movie is so good.
It was good.
I haven't seen it yet.
Good.
There were a bunch of women, or Christian moms, I guess you could say, that were so mad. One, it was probably just because they're helicopter parents and they didn't like how the helicopter mom in the movie was portrayed. But they one of their
too close to home. That's exactly right.
That's really why they're mad.
That's what my wife said.
But what triggered them, one of the main things I saw was they were so mad that they talked about period, a girl getting her period and menstrual cycles in the film. And then so I made a funny video about it, and then I had friends that this happened to where their moms or their family members never taught them about their menstrual cycle and their period. And these girls, when they got it, literally thought they were dying, thought that they had internal bleeding and just didn't tell anyone. They didn't want to bother because they weren't taught about it. That is traumatizing. Normalize periods. that's just a normal part of life. They should talk about it. It's fine.
My wife talks about that, like how she got her period and had no idea it was coming, and then was like, what in the world is happening to me? And she was scared to death. And then there was just like no education that went on past that from her mom, but her mom was not the best. And so, but it's
I think we need to blow the lid off all human function, not be afraid to talk about it. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Our bodies, we had Jenna on to talk about DID, all of these things our body does to preserve itself, to keep us safe. It's all beautiful. It's all a part of the creation of humanity. And let's learn to live it out well in relationship together, loving ourselves and loving God through that process. And that includes periods and masturbation and everything else.
All of those things, which Ben Shapiro took shots at DID here a couple of weeks ago.
Stop. Did he really?
Yeah. I meant to send y'all that video, and I was just, I think it was last week while I was with my grandma in Arkansas, but he was making fun of a DID person that had posted a TikTok, and was talking about two of their personalities. And so
how about we just get rid of the word normal, and say nobody's normal.
Yeah.
No one's normal. Right.
So today on that's really great, Paul, because today I was really excited about today. I took my son. So we went through, a process with a psychologist, and, there was a whole process we went through, because we knew that he had some learning disabilities, and you could just, you could just tell, like at home, and it had been progressively getting worse over the past, couple of years, just the way he was functioning here. And, not that he was being a bad kid, just his focus and just the way he was hearing things or walking through things was changing, and not, in a helpful way for him. And so, we've gone through this process of seeing what was going on. We didn't want to make any preconceived notions. We just wanted professionals to do their job, to diagnose, hey, this is going on, or that's going on, or hey, y'all just need to be better parents, whatever came out of it. Right. So they diagnosed him, severe ADHD. And then we went today to his primary care, to officially get his prescriptions. And, his primary care, oh geez, Falls Creek. Anyway, sorry, that was, gosh, Kristen, that resonates. Yeah. But, his doctor described to him what was happening in such a beautiful and kind and loving and compassionate way, about how his brain was beautiful, and that just because he thinks in a different way than some people think, that actually makes him special and not bad. And all of these things. And we're going to show people how incredibly smart you are. And, just all this stuff. And she amped him up. He was like, when do I start these meds? Let's go. He was he was super excited about that. Now, I don't think every day is going to be that way. Obviously, we're going to have our struggles through the process, but I am going to adopt so much of that, because it was like, hey man, you know what? Normal ain't a thing. We all operate different, and we all need something a little bit different. He and I actually got to have a really good conversation today. Paul, you brought this up, and it just really reminded me of today. This has been so heavy on my dad heart today. But I told him about taking antidepressants today. I was like, Dad needs medicine too. And I have to have that. And it's just challenging, man. But you're right. I think we need to normalize not normal, right? We need to be okay with everybody is just so different, and we're all fearfully and wonderfully made. We're created beautifully just the way we are.
Mhm.
And
that makes God's creation that much more beautiful.
it's
That
diverse.
we don't fit in this like black and white theology, this
Yes.
like binary way of thinking. We're all individual and unique, and we're all normal, and we're all not normal at the same time.
Yeah.
There's no normal.
No, there's just, and I think Paul said it best. There's just not normal. Can we just say
Mhm.
that normal is not a thing, that we are all just so unique and so diverse and so beautiful that like, we're all just going to do it differently, right? Like, and that's okay. And we're all going to need different things in the process. And I think we need to normalize being proud of that versus making fun of people who don't fit in a certain vein or
Yeah.
whatever. But I'm sorry, that just really resonated with me, Paul, and I just had to share that tonight.
I love that. And thank you for loving your child that way. And I totally believe that. I think how our brains and mental health function are a complete factor of taking care of us, of finding ways to survive horrific things. And I've become so fascinated with how the brain and our mental health works and all these things that I can't help but go, yeah, that's beautiful. And like the poster said there, the commenter, to be able to put a name on it
Mhm.
and help your son learn to navigate day to day with his special situation. I think somewhere along the way he'll find, I can do this better than other people because of this. This is a gift in
Mhm.
this area, and he'll get to celebrate that, and it'll be beautiful.
I truly believe that as well, because his intelligence and his drive is something that's really, really special. And I think this is just going to help him hone some of those skills out. And, I think he's going to look up one day and he's going to go, I get these traits
Mhm.
from this ADHD or, whatever, like this, the way that he sees the world and whatever. But because of the amazing support of modern medicine, I'm now able to hone these things in even better because, they're a part of who I am, but now I can just really focus on them the way that I, want to. And, I mean, he's going to be a game changer. He's amazing.
This is all beautiful. And through my coaching work, what I really believe is if you just tell your kids you love the hell out of them, you don't need to spank them. Love the hell out of them, and they're going to be great. If they know they're loved by their parents, it changes everything. But you can spank your kids till the cows come home, and if your kids don't think you love them and they don't have attachment to you and you're not giving them value, they're going to struggle. So just love the kids, love the hell out of them, and you're not going to have to worry about them when they grow up, So I'm really big on parenting through love rather than the rod. And I think we'll do a lot better with the next generation of children.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a good space to end. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree 1,000%.
Mhm. Good show. We did not discuss who's closing us out before the show.
We appreciate you guys hanging out with us tonight. We're super grateful for you. Do us a favor, like, comment, subscribe here on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting platform, especially if you're on Apple or Spotify. Please leave a rating and a review just so we can connect with more people. Join us on social media, Evangelical. That's evangelicalish. That's evangelical with an ISH. For Paul, I'm Jeremy, and for April as well. We thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you next week.
Dang, you almost like a real live professional at that. See you.